Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin.
The airport terminal buzzed with travelers dragging suitcases and checking phones. Kira Murrow gripped her backpack straps and stayed close to Grandma Edie, who clutched a worn leather purse against her chest like armor. "Where are we going again?" Edie asked for the third time in 20 minutes. "Portland, Grandma. Remember? To visit Aunt Ruth." Kira squeezed her grandmother's free hand. Her father, Marshall, stood 10 feet away, checking his watch with the impatience of a man who had places to be. Her mother, Janice, tapped her phone screen, jaw tight with whatever business call demanded her attention. "The lines are ridiculous," Marshall muttered. "This whole trip is a waste of time." "We promised Ruth we'd come," Janice said without looking up from her phone. Edie's fingers trembled as she opened her purse, peering inside with confusion. "I can't find my tickets." "It's fine, Grandma. Dad has them." Kira watched her grandmother's face crumple with worry. Marshall approached with sharp steps. "Just sit here, Edie. We'll go check in and come right back." Edie lowered herself onto the metal airport seat, setting her purse on her lap. "How long will you be?" 5 minutes, Marshall said. He gestured for Janice to follow him. Kira watched her parents walk toward the airline counter. But Marshall didn't stop at the counter. He turned left toward the exit signs. Janice followed without hesitation. "Dad!" Kira called out, but the airport noise swallowed her voice. She looked back at Edie, who sat perfectly still, hands folded over her purse. Then she looked at her parents, now 50 feet away and still walking toward the exit. Something twisted in Kira's stomach. She ran after them. "Dad, where are you going?" Marshall stopped near the automatic doors. His face showed no surprise at being caught. "We're just parking the car. Don't panic." "But you said you were checking in." "Kira, stop being dramatic." Janice's voice carried the edge it always had when she was lying. "We'll be right back." "What about Grandma?" "She's fine where she is," Marshall said. "Stay with her." They pushed through the doors and disappeared into the parking garage. Kira stood frozen for 30 seconds, processing what she'd witnessed. Then she sprinted back to where they'd left Edie. The seat was empty. "Grandma." Kira spun in circles, scanning the terminal. Travelers flowed around her like water around a stone. "Grandma." Panic clawed at her throat. She checked the bathroom, the gift shop, the coffee stand. Nothing. Her parents had abandoned Edie, and now Edie was lost in the airport with no idea where she was or why. Kira's hands shook as she approached the airline counter. "Excuse me, have you seen an elderly woman?" She was wearing a blue cardigan and carrying a brown purse. The attendant barely looked up. "Honey, I see dozens of elderly women every hour." "She has Alzheimer's. She's confused. You need to call airport security." But Kira was already running again, checking every gate, every waiting area, every corner where a frightened old woman might seek shelter point 20 minutes later. Kira found Edie in a maintenance hallway near the baggage claim. She sat on her suitcase, clutching her purse, tears streaming down her cheeks. An elderly man with kind eyes knelt beside her, speaking in gentle tones. "There you are, Grandma." Kira rushed to Edie's side. "Kira, what happened? Where did everyone go?" Edie's voice broke on the words. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Kira wrapped her arms around her grandmother. The elderly man stood slowly. He was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and a patient expression. "I found her wandering around back here about 15 minutes ago. She kept saying her family left her." "They did," Kira said before she could stop herself. The man's eyebrows lifted. "Excuse me. My name is Casper Linney." He extended his hand to Kira. "And you are?" "Kira Murrow. This is my grandmother, Edie." "Where are your parents, Kira?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Kira looked at Edie, who was still crying quietly and felt something harden inside her chest. "They went to park the car," she said, repeating her parents' lie. Casper studied her face. "When?" "40 minutes ago." His expression shifted. "I think we should call airport security." "No, please. They'll be back soon." "Kira, honey, where are they really?" The gentleness in his voice almost broke her resolve. Almost. "I don't know," she whispered. Casper pulled out his phone. "This isn't right. No one leaves a confused elderly woman alone in an airport." Within minutes, 2 security officers arrived. Casper explained the situation while Kira held Edie's hand and tried to think of a story that would protect her family. But she was 14 and scared, and the truth kept pushing at her throat. "What's your parents' contact information?" one officer asked. Kira recited her father's cell number. They called it 3 times. No answer. "Are you sure they said they were parking the car?" the other officer asked. Before Kira could answer, she heard her mother's voice echoing through the terminal. "Kira, Kira, where are you?" The officers led them back to the main terminal, where Janice and Marshall stood near the airline counter, looking appropriately frantic. "Oh, thank God!" Janice rushed to embrace Kira. "We've been looking everywhere for you." "Where were you?" the security officer asked. "Parking the car," Marshall said smoothly. "The garage was full. We had to go to the overflow lot. When we came back, they were gone." "Your daughter said you left 45 minutes ago." "Kids don't keep good track of time when they're panicked," Janice said with a dismissive laugh. Casper stepped forward. "I found Mrs. Murrow wandering alone in a maintenance area. She was terrified." "Edie has early-stage Alzheimer's," Marshall explained. "She gets confused easily. We told them to stay put, but teenagers don't always follow instructions." The security officers looked between Kira and her parents. Kira felt the weight of their stares and knew this was her moment to speak the truth. But then she looked at Edie, who was already confused and frightened, and imagined what would happen if she accused her parents of abandonment in front of strangers. Edie would be even more scared. The situation would explode into something bigger and messier. "I'm sorry," Kira said quietly. "I got worried when you didn't come back." "See," Janice said. "Everything's fine now." The officers exchanged glances but nodded. "Next time, maybe keep the family together," one suggested. As they walked away, Casper touched Kira's arm. "Are you sure you're okay?" She looked into his eyes and saw genuine concern. For a moment, she wanted to tell him everything, but her parents were watching, and Edie was still holding her hand, and the moment passed. "We're fine," she said. "Thank you for helping my grandmother." Casper reached into his wallet and handed her a business card. "If you ever need anything, call me." She pocketed the card without looking at it. The car ride home was silent except for the hum of the engine and Edie's occasional questions about where they were going. Kira stared out the window and replayed the airport scene in her mind. Her parents had walked toward the exit. They had left Edie alone on purpose. When they reached the house, Marshall carried Edie's suitcase to the guest room while Janice made tea. Edie sat at the kitchen table, still clutching her purse. "I don't understand what happened today," Edie said to no one in particular.
"You got confused, Mom," Janice said, not looking up from the tea preparation. "It happens. But where did you go?" "We told you. We were parking the car." Kira couldn't stay silent anymore. "You walked toward the exit." The kitchen went quiet. Janice's hand froze on the tea kettle handle. "What did you say?" Marshall asked from the doorway. "I followed you. You didn't go to the airline counter. You went toward the parking garage exit." "Kira, you're confused," Janice said carefully. "It was a stressful situation." "I'm not confused. I saw you leave." Marshall stepped into the kitchen. "Lower your voice. You're upsetting your grandmother. You left her there. You left her alone and walked away. That's enough." Marshall's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Go to your room. Tell me the truth." "The truth is that your grandmother wandered off while we were gone for 5 minutes." The truth is that you're turning a simple misunderstanding into some kind of conspiracy theory. It's not a misunderstanding. Go to your room. Kira looked at Edie, who was staring at her teacup with vacant eyes. Then she looked at her parents, who stood united in their deception. You're lying, she said quietly. Last warning, Marshall said. Kira went to her room and slammed the door. That night, she lay in bed and listened to her parents talking in their bedroom. Their voices were too low to hear clearly, but she caught fragments. Facility, better care, can't handle her anymore. The next morning, a van arrived from Sunset Manor, a state-funded care facility on the other side of town. 2 workers came to the door with paperwork and a wheelchair. I don't understand, Edie said as Janice packed her belongings. I thought I was staying here. This is better, Mom. They have doctors and nurses who specialize in memory care. But I want to stay with Kira. Kira stood in the living room doorway, watching her grandmother's world collapse in real time. You can visit, Janice said without conviction. Edie looked at Kira with desperate eyes. You'll come see me? Every week, Kira promised. For 3 months, she kept that promise. Every Saturday, she took 2 buses to reach Sunset Manor. Edie was always happy to see her, though sometimes she forgot Kira's name or thought she was someone else entirely. The facility was clean but institutional. The staff was overworked and tired. Edie shared a room with another woman who screamed at night. She had bruises on her arms that the nurses blamed on falls. How was she adjusting? Kira asked the head nurse during her 12th visit. As well as can be expected, the nurse said. Dementia patients often struggle with transitions. She seemed sad. That's normal too. The next Saturday, Kira arrived to find the front desk blocked by a security guard. I'm here to see Edie Murrow, she said. The receptionist checked her computer. I'm sorry, but you're not on the approved visitor list. There must be a mistake. I come every week. The family has restricted visitation to immediate family members only. Kira's world tilted. I'm immediate family. She's my grandmother. I'm sorry, but according to our records, only Janice and Marshall Murrow are authorized to visit. They're my parents. I'm her granddaughter. You'll need to speak with them about updating the visitor authorization. Kira took the bus home in a daze. She found her parents in the living room, reading the newspaper and watching television like it was any other Saturday. They won't let me see Grandma, she said. Janice didn't look up from her magazine. The facility thinks it's better if she has fewer disruptions to her routine. You told them not to let me visit. We made a decision that's in her best interest, Marshall said. She wants to see me. She doesn't even remember who you were half the time. The words hit Kira like a physical blow. But what hurt more was the casual cruelty in her father's voice, the way he dismissed Edie's feelings as irrelevant. I want to see her, Kira said. The answer is no, Marshall said. And if you try to sneak in there, we'll tell them to call the police. Kira stared at her parents and felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. The trust she'd carried for 14 years cracked and fell away like broken glass. You threw her away, she said quietly. We did what was necessary, Janice said. You threw her away because she was inconvenient. Go do your homework, Marshall said. Kira went to her room and pulled Casper Linney's business card from her desk drawer. She kept it all these months, not knowing why. Now she knew, but she was 14 and had no proof beyond her own memories. Who would believe her? She put the card back in the drawer and began to wait. 14 years later, Kira Murrow sat in her small apartment above a coffee shop in Fremont, staring at the laptop screen that displayed her grandmother's death certificate. Date of death, October 15th, 3 years ago. Cause, complications from pneumonia. Place, Sunset Manor Care Facility. She'd learned about Edie's death from a 2-sentence email her mother had sent her 3 days after the funeral. Edie passed away Tuesday. Services were private. No phone call. No invitation to say goodbye. Just 2 sentences that severed the last connection between Kira and the only person who had ever loved her unconditionally. Kira closed the laptop and walked to her kitchen, where file folders covered every inch of counter space. She'd spent the last 3 years collecting information, financial records, business licenses, nonprofit filings, tax documents. Everything her parents had touched professionally, she'd researched and documented. Marshall Murrow, financial advisor specializing in estate planning for wealthy clients. Licensed in Washington State. Clean record, according to official sources. Janice Murrow, founder and director of Northwest Senior Support Services, a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing comprehensive care solutions for elderly clients and their families. On paper, they looked like pillars of the community. But Kira had learned to read between the lines. She opened Marshall's file and spread the documents across her small dining table. Bank statements, client lists, trust documents. Everything she'd gathered through public records requests, internet searches, and careful observation. Her job as an administrative assistant at the University of Washington gave her access to databases and research tools. Her supervisor thought she was working on a graduate thesis about elder care policy. She wasn't entirely wrong. Kira picked up a printout of her mother's nonprofit tax filing. Northwest Senior Support Services had reported $340,000 in donations last year. But according to the itemized expenses, only $80,000 had gone directly to client services. The rest had been absorbed by administrative costs and program development. She cross-referenced the donation list with her father's client roster. 7 matches. 7 wealthy families who donated to Janice's nonprofit and used Marshall's financial services. Convenient. Kira's phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and almost didn't answer. Her mother called exactly twice a year, Kira's birthday and Christmas. It was neither. Hello, Mom. Kira, I need you to know that your father and I are thinking of moving to Arizona. No small talk. No inquiry about Kira's life. Straight to business, as always. Okay, Kira said. We're selling the house. I thought you might want to come by and pick up anything of yours that we might have stored. I moved out 6 years ago. I don't have anything there. Well, there might be some childhood items. Old photos, that sort of thing. Kira understood. They were cutting all ties, erasing any evidence that they'd ever been a family. I'll think about it, she said. Don't think too long. We're listing the house next month. The line went dead. Kira set her phone down and returned to her research point 3 years ago. She'd stood outside Sunset Manor and watched through the fence as they lowered her grandmother's casket into the ground. A handful of care facility staff attended. No family, no friends, just a perfunctory service for a forgotten woman. That night, Kira had made a decision. Justice delayed wasn't justice denied. It was justice prepared. She opened her laptop and pulled up the website for the Washington State Department of Revenue. She'd been documenting irregularities in her parents' financial activities for years. Now she had enough evidence to file formal complaints, but complaints could be dismissed. Investigations could be buried. She needed something bigger, something that would expose not just their crimes, but their cruelty. Kira reached for her phone and dialed a number she'd memorized but never called. Talia Benoit speaking. Ms. Benoit, my name is Kira Murrow. I believe you worked at Sunset Manor about 4 years ago. A pause. Yes, I did. Are you calling about a family member? My grandmother, Edie Murrow. She died there 3 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss. What can I help you with? I'd like to meet with you. There are some things about her care that I need to understand. What kind of things? Kira looked at the files spread across her table. The kind that involved neglect and financial exploitation. Another pause, longer this time. Where would you like to meet? The coffee shop on 15th Avenue was nearly empty at 2 in the afternoon. Kira sat in a corner booth, watching the door and rehearsing her opening lines. She'd chosen this place because it was public but quiet, the kind of neutral territory where difficult conversations could happen without drawing attention. Talia Benoit arrived 10 minutes early, looking exactly like her LinkedIn photo, a woman in her 40s with graying brown hair and the tired eyes of someone who'd seen too much human suffering. She wore scrubs under a denim jacket, suggesting she'd come directly from work. Talia approached the table cautiously. Thank you for meeting me. Kira stood and shook her hand. Talia sat across from her and studied her face. You look familiar. Did I know you when your grandmother was at Sunset? I visited for a few months. Then my parents restricted my access. That's unusual. Most families encourage visits from grandchildren. My parents aren't most families. The waitress brought coffee without being asked. Talia wrapped her hands around her mug and waited. Tell me about Sunset Manor, Kira said. It's a state-funded facility. Limited resources, overworked staff. Not the worst I've seen, but far from the best. Did you know my grandmother? Edie, yes. Quiet woman, very polite. She used to ask about you. The words hit Kira harder than she'd expected. She took a sip of coffee to steady herself. What did she say? She wondered why you stopped visiting. She thought maybe she'd done something wrong. Kira closed her eyes. She didn't do anything wrong. I figured as much. Family dynamics and elder care can be complicated. My parents abandoned her at an airport when I was 14. They told her to sit down and wait. Then they walked away and left her there. Talia's expression shifted. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation. It's what happened. Do you have any proof? Kira pulled a folder from her bag. Not of the airport incident, but I have proof of other things. She spread documents across the table. Bank statements, nonprofit filings, trust documents. My mother runs a charity that supposedly helps seniors. My father manages their estates. They work together to redirect funds that are meant for elder care. Talia examined the papers with growing interest. How did you get these? Public records, mostly. Some creative research. You've been investigating your own parents. For 3 years. Talia leaned back in her seat. Why are you telling me this? Because you worked at Sunset. You saw what kind of care my grandmother received. You know the system from the inside. What do you want from me? Help. Testimony. Evidence that connects their financial crimes to actual harm done to seniors. That's a big ask. I know. Talia was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents. Your grandmother died of pneumonia complications, but she'd been declining for months before that. Weight loss, frequent falls, signs of depression. Was she getting proper care? Define proper. She was fed, medicated, kept clean. But was she thriving? No. Why not? Facilities like Sunset are warehouses. They keep people alive, but they don't help them live. Kira felt anger building in her chest. And my parents knew that when they put her there. Most families don't have better options. Long-term care is expensive. My parents had options. They had money. They chose the cheapest facility they could find because they wanted her to disappear. Talia pushed the documents back toward Kira. I left Sunset 2 years ago because I couldn't stand watching people waste away in that place. I became a private care coordinator specifically so I could help families find better options. Will you help me? What exactly are you planning to do with this information? Kira met her eyes. Destroy them. That's not justice. That's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. Talia was quiet for another long moment. Finally, she nodded. I'll help you document the care failures. But I won't be part of any scheme to ruin people's lives. Fair enough. They shook hands across the table, sealing an alliance that would change everything. 3 days later, Kira sat in another coffee shop, this one in Georgetown, waiting for her second recruitment meeting. She'd found Whit Laramie through Facebook after searching through her old high school class directory. Whit Laramie had been her lab partner in sophomore chemistry and the closest thing she'd had to a best friend before her family imploded. He was working as a mechanic now, according to his profile, and still lived in the same neighborhood where they'd grown up. He walked through the door at exactly 4 o'clock, wearing work clothes and looking older than his 28 years. But his smile was the same one she remembered from high school hallways. Kira Murrow, he said, sliding into the booth across from her. I'll be damned. Hello, Whit. You look good. Different, but good. Different how? Serious. Like you're carrying something heavy. She'd forgotten how perceptive he was. How's the garage treating you? Can't complain. Steady work, decent pay. What about you? Last I heard, you were working at the university. Still am. Administrative stuff. And you call me out of the blue because... Kira pulled out her phone and showed him a photo of her parents at a charity fundraiser. Remember them? Your folks, yeah. They still living in Ballard. For now. They're planning to move to Arizona. Good for them, I guess. Do you remember my grandmother? Whit's expression softened. Edie, sure. Sweet lady. Used to make those amazing oatmeal cookies. She died 3 years ago. Shit, I'm sorry. I didn't know. My parents put her in a state facility and cut off her contact with everyone who cared about her. She died alone. Whit studied her face. That's rough. But why are you telling me this? Because I'm going to make sure they pay for what they did. And I need help from someone who knew our family before everything went wrong. What kind of help? Kira leaned forward. The kind that might involve bending a few rules. Whit grinned. Now you've got my attention. 6 weeks later, Kira sat in her apartment, surrounded by enough evidence to bury her parents professionally and financially. Talia had provided detailed documentation of care failures at Sunset Manor, including incident reports that showed Edie had fallen multiple times without proper follow-up care. Whit had used his connections in the trades community to gather information about Marshall's off-the-books consulting work. But the breakthrough had come from Kira's own methodical research. She discovered that Northwest Senior Support Services, her mother's nonprofit, had 3 subsidiary organizations: Elder Advocacy Partners, Senior Resource Network, and Cascade Care Solutions. All 3 shared the same registered address, a UPS store mailbox in Bellevue. All 3 had received federal grants totaling $1.2 million over the past 5 years. None of them actually provided services to seniors. The money flowed from government grants to the fake nonprofits, then to consulting fees paid to Marshall's financial planning firm, then to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. It was elegant, sophisticated, and completely illegal. Kira printed the final documents and added them to her growing collection. Tomorrow, she would file formal complaints with the Washington State Attorney General's office, the IRS, and the Department of Health and Human Services. But first, she wanted to test the water. She picked up her phone and dialed her father's office. Murrow Financial Planning, this is Denise. Hello, I'd like to schedule a consultation with Mr. Murrow. I'm looking for help with my mother's estate planning. Certainly. May I have your name? Elizabeth Chun. The name came easily. She'd been practicing it for weeks. And what type of services are you interested in? My mother is in early-stage dementia. We need to set up trust to protect her assets and ensure she gets proper care. Mr. Murrow has extensive experience with those situations. How about Thursday at 2? Perfect. Kira hung up and smiled for the first time in months. Thursday arrived gray and drizzling, typical October weather in Seattle. Kira dressed carefully, professional but not expensive. The look of someone with money to protect, but not enough to waste. At Marshall's office was in a glass tower downtown, with a view of Elliott Bay and the pretense of success. His assistant led Kira to a conference room where Marshall waited with a folder of brochures and a practiced smile that he'd aged since she'd last seen him. His hair was thinner, his face more lined, but his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, always measuring what he could gain from any situation. Ms. Chun, thank you for coming in. He stood and shook her hand. I understand you're dealing with a difficult family situation. My mother has early Alzheimer's. We're worried about protecting her assets. A common concern. Please sit. Kira took the chair across from him and waited while he opened his folder. Tell me about your mother's current financial situation, he said. She has about $800,000 in savings and investments. She owns her home, which is worth maybe $350,000. She's getting confused about money, and we're worried about her being taken advantage of. Marshall nodded sympathetically. Unfortunately, elder financial abuse is more common than people realize. Even family members sometimes make decisions that aren't in the senior's best interest. The irony was suffocating. Kira kept her expression neutral. What would you recommend? There are several strategies we can employ. Revocable trusts, power of attorney arrangements, special needs planning. The key is to move quickly before her condition deteriorates further. How quickly? Ideally, within the next few months. Once someone is deemed mentally incapacitated, our options become more limited. And the costs. My fee for comprehensive estate planning runs about $15,000, plus ongoing management fees, of course. That seems reasonable. Marshall smiled. I'm also going to recommend that you consider our affiliated care coordination services. My wife runs a nonprofit that specializes in helping families navigate the senior care system. What kind of services? Everything from facility placement to care advocacy to financial oversight. It's a full-service approach that ensures your mother gets the care she needs while protecting her assets. And the cost for that? The nonprofit operates on a donation basis. Most families contribute between 2 and 5% of the estate value annually. Kira did the math quickly. Her fictional mother's estate would generate between $16,000 and $40,000 a year for Janice's fake charity. That sounds wonderful, she said. When can we get started? I'll have my assistant prepare the initial paperwork. We can have everything ready for signature by next week. Kira shook his hand again. Thank you so much. This is such a relief. As she walked back to her car, Kira felt a mixture of satisfaction and disgust. Her father had just tried to sell her the same service he'd used to exploit dozens of families over the years. The casual way he described moving quickly before the client became incapacitated revealed everything about his predatory mindset. She had what she needed. That evening, she sat in her apartment and began drafting her complaint to the Attorney General's office. She detailed the fraudulent nonprofits, the diverted funds, and the pattern of financial exploitation that had funded her parents' comfortable lifestyle, while seniors like Edie suffered in substandard facilities. But as she wrote, she realized that legal complaints weren't enough. Her parents would hire lawyers, claim ignorance, probably get away with fines and community service. They'd move to Arizona and disappear into retirement, while their victims remained forgotten. Kira wanted more than justice. She wanted consequences that matched the crime. She closed her laptop and reached for her phone. Whit, it's me. Are you free tomorrow night? Sure. What's up? I need to ask you to do something that might get us both in trouble. What kind of trouble? The kind that requires plausible deniability. What was quiet for a moment? You want me to bug your dad's office. I want you to help me document his crimes in real time. That's illegal, you know. So is stealing from seniors. Fair point. When do we start? The recording device was smaller than Kira had expected, about the size of a thumb drive with an adhesive backing that would stick to almost any surface. Wood had obtained it through contacts he wouldn't name, and he made it clear that if they got caught, she was on her own. Building security is pretty standard, he'd explained over coffee. Cameras in the lobby and elevators, but most offices don't have surveillance inside individual suites. The cleaning crew comes through around 9 p.m. If you can get in there with them, you'll have about 10 minutes to plant the device and get out. What if someone sees me? You're visiting a client who forgot some paperwork. You're dropping it off after hours as a favor. Keep it simple. The plan had worked perfectly. Kira had followed the cleaning crew into the building, taken the elevator to the 15th floor, and walked confidently to her father's office. The device was now tucked under his desk phone, recording every conversation that happened in that room. 3 days later, she had 12 hours of audio and a sick feeling in her stomach that Marshall's recorded conversations were worse than anything she'd imagined. He talked about managing elderly clients like they were problems to be solved rather than people to be helped. He coached other advisors on how to identify vulnerable prospects and move quickly to gain control of their assets. In one particularly damning conversation with a colleague, he laughed about a client's daughter who kept asking uncomfortable questions about her father's trust arrangements. Some families think they're entitled to know every detail, he'd said. I told her the trust is designed to protect her father from making impulsive decisions. She backed off pretty quickly. But the conversation that finally broke Kira's composure was a phone call between her parents, recorded 2 days ago. How much longer do we need to keep this up? Janice asked. The Arizona house closes next month, Marshall replied. After that, we can shut down the nonprofits and transfer everything offshore. What about the clients? What about them? They signed the documents. If they want to complain after we're gone, let them try to find us. And Kira, what about her? She's been asking questions. Denise said someone called about estate planning and mentioned Alzheimer's. The description sounded like her. So, what if she knows something? She's a file clerk at a state university. She doesn't know anything. She's not stupid, Marshall. She never was. She's also not a threat. She has no proof of anything. And even if she did, she's too scared to do anything about it. Kira turned off the recording and sat in her dark apartment, shaking with rage. Her parents weren't just criminals, they were cowards who thought she was too weak to fight back. They were wrong. The next morning, she called Talia and asked to meet at their usual coffee shop. But when Talia arrived, she looked troubled. I've been thinking about our conversation, Talia said without preamble. About what you're planning to do. What about it? I'm worried you're crossing lines that you can't uncross. Kira set down her coffee cup. Such as, revenge isn't the same as justice, Kira. Justice is about making things right. Revenge is about making people suffer. Sometimes people deserve to suffer. Do they? Or do you just want them to? The question hung between them like a challenge. Kira thought about the recordings, about her parents' casual cruelty, about Edie dying alone in a state facility while they planned their escape to Arizona. They threw away the only person who ever loved me, she said quietly. They let her die in neglect while they stole money meant to help people like her. Tell me why they don't deserve to suffer. Because suffering doesn't bring your grandmother back. It doesn't help the other seniors they've exploited. It just makes you into someone you don't want to be. I know exactly who I want to be. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you look like someone who's about to destroy her own life in pursuit of revenge. Kira felt something cold settle in her chest. Are you backing out? I'm asking you to think about what you're really trying to accomplish here. I'm trying to make sure that people who hurt vulnerable seniors face consequences for their actions. By breaking into offices and planting illegal recording devices. You don't know about that. I know enough. Talia leaned forward. Kira, I've seen what happens when people let anger consume them. It doesn't end well. I'm not consumed by anger. I'm focused. You're consumed by something. The question is whether it's justice or vengeance. Kira studied Talia's face and saw genuine concern. For a moment, she almost wavered, almost allowed herself to consider that maybe there was another way. Then she thought about Edie, sitting alone in an airport terminal, abandoned by the people who were supposed to protect her. She thought about her grandmother's last years, spent in a facility that treated her like a problem instead of a person. They threw away the only person who ever loved me, she repeated. I'm not stopping. Talia was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. Then I'll help you document the care failures. But I won't be part of anything illegal. That's all I'm asking. But even as she said it, Kira knew it wasn't true. She was planning something much bigger than legal complaints and care documentation. She was planning to build a trap so comprehensive that her parents would have no choice but to face the consequences of their actions. And if that made her someone she didn't want to be, so be it. Some prices were worth paying. The bankruptcy auction for Sunset Manor happened on a rainy Tuesday in February. Kira sat in the back of the conference room, wearing a business suit and representing Cascade Senior Living LLC, a company that existed only on paper and in a checking account funded by her grandmother's life insurance payout. The auctioneer's voice droned through the list of assets. The 40-bed facility, all equipment and furnishings, plus the land and buildings. The opening bid was $800,000.2 other companies bid against her, but Kira had done her research. Sunset Manor was a money pit too old, too small, too damaged by neglect to be profitable without major investment. She let the bidding climb to $950,000, then made her move. $1,200,000, she said clearly. The room went quiet. The other bidders looked at their paperwork and shook their heads. At that price, the facility would need to be completely renovated to turn a profit. Going once, going twice, sold to Cascade Senior Living for $1,200,000. 3 weeks later, Kira stood in the lobby of what had been Sunset Manor, watching contractors tear out decades of institutional carpeting and fluorescent lighting. The place would be beautiful when they were finished. Hardwood floors, natural lighting, private rooms with attached bathrooms, a therapy garden where residents could grow flowers and vegetables. IT would also cost another $2 million to complete, money she didn't have. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, she had work to do. She found Talia in what would eventually be the new director's office, reviewing staffing plans and care protocols. I can't believe you actually bought this place, Talia said without looking up from her paperwork. Someone had to, and you're sure you can afford the renovations? I'll figure it out. Talia finally looked at her. With what money? Money that's been stolen from seniors for the past 5 years. It's time to put it back where it belongs. You're planning to steal their offshore accounts. I'm planning to recover stolen assets and return them to their intended purpose. That's still stealing. Is it stealing when you take back something that was already stolen? Talia didn't answer. She'd learned to recognize when Kira's mind was made up. What do you want to call the place? She asked instead. The Edie Linney Center, Kira said without hesitation. Linney? That's not your grandmother's last name. It's the name of the man who helped her when my parents abandoned her. He was the only adult who tried to do the right thing that day. Talia nodded. I like it. 3 miles away, Whit Laramie was breaking into Marshall's office for the second time. The first break-in had been to plant the recording device. This time, he was installing a more sophisticated piece of equipment, a keylogger that would capture every password and login credential Marshall used on his computer. The security guard was making his rounds on the 10th floor, which gave Whit about 20 minutes to work. He slipped into the office, attached the device to the back of Marshall's computer tower, and activated the recording function. By tomorrow, Kira would have access to every offshore account, every hidden trust, every penny that her parents had stolen over the past 5 years. The next morning, Kira sat in her apartment with 2 laptops open, watching money flow across screens like water. Marshall's offshore accounts contained $3.2 million, split between banks in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. Her mother's nonprofit had another $400,000 in various operating accounts. That IT was enough to finish the renovations on the care center and fund operations for the first 2 years. It was also enough to destroy her parents' retirement plans and expose their crimes to the world. Kira started with the smallest accounts, transferring funds in amounts that wouldn't trigger immediate attention. $50,000 here, $75,000 there. Money that would look like standard business transfers to anyone not paying close attention. By the end of the week, she'd moved $800,000 to accounts controlled by Cascade Senior Living. The care center renovations accelerated, and Talia began hiring staff for the grand opening. But Kira wasn't done yet. Marshall discovered the missing money on a Friday afternoon, while reviewing quarterly statements before his weekend golf game. The first transfer had been disguised as a management fee, the second as a consulting payment. But 8 transactions in 5 days created a pattern that set off alarms in his paranoid mind that he called his account manager in the Cayman Islands first. James, it's Marshall Murrow. I need you to freeze all outgoing transfers on my accounts immediately. Is there a problem, Mr. Murrow? Someone's been accessing my accounts without authorization. That's impossible. Your security protocols are state-of-the-art. Then explain how $800,000 disappeared this week. James went quiet. I'll investigate immediately. But Mr. Murrow, if someone has compromised your login credentials, they might have access to other sensitive information as well. Marshall's blood turned to ice. If someone could access his bank accounts, they could access everything: client files, correspondence, documentation of every financial crime he'd committed over the past decade. That he hung up and called Janice. We have a problem, he said without preamble. What kind of problem? Someone stealing from our offshore accounts. Who? I don't know yet. But whoever it is knows our security protocols and has been planning this for months. How much did they take? $800,000 so far. Janice was quiet for a long moment. Do you think it's a client? Maybe. Or a business competitor. Or, he paused, remembering his wife's earlier concerns. Do you still have Kira's contact information? What? I want to know where she's been and what she's been doing. That evening, Kira was reviewing contractor invoices when her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but she answered anyway. Hello, Kira. It's your father. Her hand tightened on the phone. Hello, Dad. I haven't heard from you in a while. How are things? The casual tone was obviously forced. Marshall had never called to chat in her entire adult life. Fine. What do you want? Can a father call his daughter? Not this father. Marshall's mask slipped slightly. I'm calling because your mother and I are concerned about you. Concerned how? We heard you've been asking questions about estate planning. Financial matters. Kira's pulse quickened. Someone had connected her fake consultation to her real identity. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Kira, if you're having financial problems, you should come to us for help. Don't trust strangers with important decisions. I'm fine, Dad. Are you? Because we also heard you've been talking to people about Sunset Manor, about your grandmother. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. They knew she was investigating them. Grandma died 3 years ago, Kira said carefully. Why would I be talking about her now? That's what I'm wondering. Maybe because you never let me say goodbye. Kira, we've been through this. The facility thought it was best. The facility thought what you told them to think. Marshall was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was colder. I'm going to give you some advice, and I want you to listen carefully. Sometimes people get ideas about situations they don't fully understand. They start making accusations based on incomplete information. That kind of behavior can have serious consequences. Is that a threat? It's a warning from someone who cares about your well-being. Since when do you care about my well-being? Since always. You're my daughter. Then prove it. Tell me the truth about what happened at the airport. The line went silent for so long that Kira thought he'd hung up. Finally, Marshall spoke. Your grandmother was sick, Kira. She was confused and frightened, and we were trying to do what was best for everyone involved. You left her there. We stepped away for 5 minutes. You walked toward the exit. You were 14 and scared. Memory isn't always reliable under stress. Kira felt the familiar rage building in her chest. Even now, even after everything, he was still lying to her face. I know what I saw, she said quietly. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've spent the last 15 years building a fantasy around a misunderstood situation. And now that fantasy is driving you to make very poor decisions. What kind of decisions? The kind that could ruin your life if you're not careful. Like yours are about to be ruined. Marshall's voice turned deadly quiet. What did you say? Nothing, Dad. I have to go. She hung up before he could respond an hour later. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Some people don't know when to stop digging. But graves are holes too. Kira stared at the message for a long time, then forwarded it to Whit with a note. They're scared. Time to finish this. The package arrived on a Wednesday morning, delivered by a legal courier who required Kira's signature and photo identification. The return address showed the law offices of Brennan, Foster & Associates in downtown Seattle. Inside was a handwritten letter, a notarized statement, and a business card she recognized but hadn't seen in 15 years. The letter was written in careful script on expensive letterhead. Dear Ms. Murrow, if you are reading this, then I have passed away, and my attorney has executed the instructions I left regarding you. I hope you remember me, Casper Linney, the man who helped your grandmother at SeaTac Airport in 2010. I never forgot that day, or the look in your eyes when you realized your parents had abandoned Mrs. Murrow. I also never forgot the way they lied to the airport security officers, or how you protected them despite knowing the truth that I spent 40 years as a federal attorney specializing in elder law and financial crimes. I've seen every form of abuse and exploitation imaginable, but I've rarely seen anything as calculated and cruel as what I witnessed that afternoon that I kept my business card in case you ever needed help. When you didn't call, I assumed you'd moved on with your life. But I also documented what I saw, in case the day ever came when documentation might be useful. The enclosed statement is notarized and legally admissible. It details everything I observed at the airport, including the direction your parents walked, toward the parking garage exit, not toward the airline counter. The length of time they were gone, 47 minutes, not 5, and your grandmother's condition when I found her, terrified, confused, and convinced her family had abandoned her. That I also took the liberty of having a colleague investigate your parents' professional activities. The enclosed report documents a pattern of financial crimes stretching back more than a decade. I never acted on this information because I had no standing to do so. But you do. Your grandmother was a lovely woman who deserved better than she received. I hope this helps you ensure she gets the justice she was denied in life. Respectfully, Casper Linney, deceased, former Assistant U.S. Attorney Kira read the letter 3 times before opening the notarized statement. It was written in legal language, but the meaning was crystal clear. Casper had documented everything, from the timeline of her parents' actions to their suspicious behavior when questioned by airport security. The final document was a 20-page report detailing her parents' financial crimes, complete with bank records, client testimonials, and evidence of fraud dating back to 2008. Everything Kira had discovered through her own investigation was confirmed and expanded by a federal attorney's professional analysis. She picked up her phone and called the law office. Brennan, Foster & Associates, how may I help you? This is Kira Murrow. I just received a package from your office regarding Casper Linney. One moment, please. A different voice came on the line. Ms. Murrow, this is David Foster. Mr. Linney left very specific instructions regarding you. I trust you received his materials? Yes. When did he die? 6 months ago. Heart attack. He'd been in poor health for several years, but he insisted on keeping your file active until the end. He kept a file on me. He kept a file on your family. He was quite concerned about what he'd witnessed at the airport, and when his colleague's investigation revealed your parents' financial activities, he felt obligated to preserve the evidence. Why didn't he act on it himself? He had no legal standing to intervene in private family matters, but he believed that someday you might need proof of what really happened. Kira felt tears building behind her eyes. A stranger had spent 15 years protecting evidence that could vindicate her grandmother's memory and expose her parents' crimes. What do I do with this information? She asked. That's entirely up to you, Ms. Murrow. But I will say that Mr. Linney was very thorough in his documentation. If you decide to pursue legal action, you'll have everything you need. Kira hung up and sat at her kitchen, surrounded by the evidence that would destroy her parents' lives and vindicate everything she believed since she was 14 years old. She wasn't alone anymore. She never had been. The indictment was unsealed on a Tuesday morning in April. Marshall Murrow and Janice Murrow were charged with 18 counts of fraud, elder financial abuse, money laundering, and tax evasion. The charges carried a potential sentence of 30 years in federal prison. The news broke at 9 a.m. By 10 a.m., reporters were camped outside their Ballard home. By noon, Marshall's financial planning license had been suspended and Janice's nonprofit had been raided by federal agents. Kira watched the coverage from her office at the Edie Linney Center, where the first residents had moved in 3 weeks earlier. The facility was beautiful now, bright, clean, filled with the sound of laughter and conversation. Everything Sunset Manor had never been. How does it feel? Talia asked, joining her at the window. Like justice, Kira said. Not revenge. Justice for my grandmother. Justice for every senior they exploited. Justice for everyone who trusted them and got betrayed. On the television, a reporter was reading from the indictment. The defendants are accused of creating multiple fraudulent nonprofit organizations and using them to steal more than $3 million in federal grants intended for senior care services. Kira's phone rang. The caller ID showed the number for the U.S. Attorney's Office. Ms. Murrow, this is Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Walsh. I'm prosecuting the case against your parents. I was wondering if you'd be willing to testify. About what? The pattern of abuse that led to these charges. Your testimony about the airport incident and your grandmother's care would help establish their long-term pattern of elder exploitation. Kira looked around the therapy room where Mrs. Patterson was teaching 3 other residents how to plant tomato seeds. This was what senior care should look like. Dignity, respect, genuine human connection. Yes, she said. I'll testify. The trial began in September. Kira's testimony came on the 3rd day, after the prosecution had established the financial crimes through bank records and witness statements. She wore a simple black dress and carried a folder containing photos of her grandmother. The courtroom was packed with reporters, former clients, and families who had been victimized by her parents' schemes. Please state your name for the record, the prosecutor said. Kira Elizabeth Murrow. And what is your relationship to the defendants? They're my parents. A murmur went through the courtroom. It wasn't every day that a child testified against their own parents in federal court. Ms. Murrow, I want to take you back to August 15th, 2010. You were 14 years old, traveling with your parents and your grandmother to Portland. Can you tell us what happened at SeaTac Airport? Kira looked across the courtroom at her parents, sitting at the defense table with their expensive lawyers. Marshall stared straight ahead, refusing to meet her eyes. Janice dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, playing the role of the grieving mother. My father told my grandmother to sit down and wait while they checked in for the flight, Kira said clearly. But instead of going to the airline counter, they walked toward the parking garage exit. How do you know that? I follow them. I watched them leave the terminal. What did you do then? I went back to find my grandmother. She was gone from where they'd left her. Did you find her? Eventually. She was lost and confused, crying in a maintenance area. A man named Casper Linney was helping her. What happened when your parents returned? They lied to the airport security officers. They said they'd only been gone for 5 minutes, that my grandmother had wandered off. but they've been gone for almost an hour. How did this incident affect your relationship with your grandmother? 3 months later, my parents moved her to a state-funded care facility. They removed my visiting privileges so I couldn't see her anymore. Did you ever see your grandmother again? No. She died 3 years ago. I found out in an email. The prosecutor picked up a document from her table. Ms. Murrow, I'm showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 47. Do you recognize this? Kira looked at the notarized statement Casper Linney had left for her. Yes. It's a witness statement from the man who helped my grandmother that day. Does this statement corroborate your testimony about what happened at the airport? Yes. Exactly. Ms. Murrow, in your opinion, why did your parents abandon your grandmother at the airport? The defense attorney objected, but the judge allowed the question. Kira looked at her parents again. This time, Marshall was watching her, his face a mask of cold hatred. Because she was inconvenient, Kira said. She had Alzheimer's, and they didn't want to deal with her anymore. They thought if they left her there, someone else would take responsibility for her care. How do you know that? Because that's exactly what happened. They left her at the airport, claimed it was an accident, then used the incident as evidence that she couldn't live independently. 3 days later, she was in a state facility. One final question, Ms. Murrow. Your parents are charged with stealing money that was intended to help seniors like your grandmother. Do you believe their financial crimes are connected to their treatment of Mrs. Murrow? Objection, the defense attorney said. Calls for speculation. I'll rephrase, the prosecutor said. Based on your experience with your parents, do you believe they view elderly people as vulnerable targets to be exploited rather than human beings deserving of care and respect? Kira thought about Edie sitting alone in an airport terminal, waiting for family members who were never coming back. She thought about the residents of the Edie Linney Center, who were thriving in an environment built on compassion instead of profit. Yes, she said, I believe they see seniors as opportunities, not people. My grandmother died in silence because they decided her life wasn't worth the inconvenience of caring for her. And they've been making the same decision about other people's grandparents ever since. The courtroom was silent when she finished. Kira gathered her folder and walked past the defense table, where her parents sat in ruins. She didn't look back. 6 months later, Kira walked through the therapy garden at the Edie Linney Center, where spring roses were beginning to bloom. The facility housed 42 residents now, all receiving the kind of care that honored their dignity and celebrated their lives. Mrs. Patterson waved from the vegetable garden, where she was teaching a new resident how to plant cucumber seeds. Mr. Ramirez sat in the shade, reading a newspaper and occasionally offering commentary to anyone who would listen. The morning sunshine filtered through the apple trees that Kira had planted along the garden's perimeter. The place looks good, Witt said, joining her on the stone path that wound between the flower beds. It looks like what it should have always looked like. Any word on your parents? Marshall got 15 years. Janice got 12. They'll be eligible for parole in 8 and 6 years, respectively. Think they'll try to contact you when they get out. Kira stopped at a memorial plaque set into a granite boulder near the center of the garden. The engraving read, "In honor of Edie Murrow, you were never forgotten." I don't think about them anymore, she said. This place isn't about them. It's about her. Talia emerged from the main building, carrying a coffee tray and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who'd found her calling. How's Mrs. Chun settling in? Kira asked. She loves her room, and she's already volunteering to help with the art therapy program. Good. She deserves to be happy. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the residents move through their morning routines with the confidence of people who knew they were valued and protected. She would have loved the roses, Kira said quietly. She would have loved all of it, Talia replied, but especially knowing that her granddaughter turned her memory into something beautiful. A year later, the Edie Linney Center would expand to include a second building. 2 years after that, Kira would open a third facility across town. The network would grow to serve more than 200 seniors, all receiving care funded by the money her parents had stolen and the justice system had recovered. But on this spring morning, surrounded by flowers and friends and the sound of elderly voices sharing stories and laughter, Kira felt something she hadn't experienced since she was 14 years old. Peace, Her grandmother was finally heard.